and the county offices of ed involved in this work are represented on this slide. And as part of our collective commitment at Cali to equity, we are opening today with a land acknowledgement, which is a process of opening an event or gathering by acknowledging the traditional indigenous inhabitants of that land. We acknowledge that this virtual meeting is taking place throughout the unceded territory of California, home to nearly 200 tribal nations. We acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. I am currently talking to you from San Joaquin County, located on the traditional territory of the Plains Miwok in the northern part of the county, and territory of the North Valley Yokut people in the southern part of the county. We would like to respectfully acknowledge with gratitude their stewardship of the land that we call our home, and recognize their tremendous contribution to the preservation of this land. And we encourage you all to think about deeper ways you are currently partnering or could partner with Indigenous leaders and communities wherever you are. Using the link provided in the chat box, please feel free to add the traditional unceded territory you are calling in from in chat. And thank you for participating in this land acknowledgement. We believe it's an important step towards reconciliation, inviting and honoring the truth, and showing respect towards correcting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous people's history and culture. Okay, so I want to just share some of our objectives for today's webinar. We want to recognize that environmental literacy is a core competency for all of California students, to understand how environmental literacy supports instruction for equity, connect environmental literacy to content areas using our environmental principles and concepts, our EP&Cs, right? Our frameworks and integration strategies. And finally, to identify next steps to better include environmental literacy in your practice. And now I'd like to welcome Troy Brown, Associate Superintendent of Student Programs and Services for San Joaquin County Office of Education, to help us kick off this webinar. And I just have a brief bio that I'd like to share. And so Troy Brown began his career in education as a high school English teacher with the Tracy Unified School District, where he also coached basketball and soccer. He then became the assistant principal at Tracy High and principal at West High, a school community with students and families who had tremendous needs. According to Troy, his experience as a principal at West High turned out to be one of the greatest blessings of his life. It was there that he gained a whole new perspective on student needs and the importance of developing positive relationships. Troy next served as the Director of Student Services and Curriculum with Tracy Unified, and now serves as the Associate Superintendent of Student Programs and Services at the San Joaquin County Office of Education. As an Associate Superintendent, Troy has been blessed to meet with students, staff, and families from all parts of San Joaquin County. His current position has opened up opportunities to meet with community and political leaders to discuss and collaborate on ways to improve education for students in the San Joaquin County. His role allows him to work with amazing educators from San Joaquin County Office of Ed in an effort to support students and families with the greatest needs in the county. Troy recently earned his doctoral degree in K-12 organizational leadership and hopes to continue to develop skills learned while earning his degree. It is with great pleasure that I also share Troy's appointment as the 27th San Joaquin County Superintendent of Schools, effective July 1st, 2021.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you very much. This is exciting to see such a big crowd on here. So congratulations to all of you. So good afternoon, everyone. It is wonderful to see you. It's a pleasure to join you for this webinar today as we learn more about the California Environmental Literacy Initiative's work and the collaborative approaches being taken across the state to support educators with delivering solutions-oriented integrated curriculum. At the San Joaquin County Office of Education, we are a major proponent of outdoor education and environmental literacy. We know that connecting students with the natural world increases self-esteem, improves concentration, promotes self-awareness, and so much more. We have experienced the excitement on students' faces as they see the ocean for the first time. We have seen the look of awe as they look up at beautiful redwoods that tower above them. And we ourselves can recall the unique outdoor education experiences that we too had as children with activities such as science camp. The SJCUE has a long tradition of supporting outdoor education and environmental literacy for students and educators in our region. For over 60 years, we have operated a residential science camp that has provided generations of students in our region with access to the redwood forests and coastal ecosystem in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We are also in the process of acquiring the Sky Mountain Outdoor Education Center, which we are really excited about. It is situated on 62 acres in the Sierra Nevada mountains in Tahoe National Forest in Placer County. The new site will expand students' environmental literacy by introducing them to a different ecosystem and teaching them about one of California's important watershed systems. Locally, we own and operate the Durham Ferry Outdoor Education Center, located on 80 acres of wild riparian ecosystem along the San Joaquin River in Manteca. At Durham Ferry, STEM programs coordinator Dean Reese and others from our Enviro team provide day programs for students in grades 3 through 12 and facilitate professional learning on environmental literacy implementation for our region. And our Teachers College of San Joaquin, the only WASC accredited institution of higher education that is operated by a county office of education, offers a virtual environmental literacy master's degree program to prepare educators for leadership roles in STEM. As we know, California faces environmental challenges that cause health issues for communities throughout our state. So emphasizing our work in this area is more important than ever. It is our responsibility to educate our communities about environmental challenges and their effects. Working towards solutions to our challenges is a great way to engage our students in their learning. However, this is multidisciplinary work. We must find ways to weave environmental literacy into science, history, English, health, arts, and math. At the SJCUE, we have established several environmental literacy networks for students, educators, and partners. We like to say we're going to yell it, spell it, tell it, and gel it. These acronyms stand for our Youth for Environmental Literacy Network, Community Partners for Environmental Literacy Network, Teachers for Environmental Literacy Network, kind of a tongue twister, and Green Engagement Leaders. These networks help identify the champions in our community passionate about this work and connect them with our students, teachers, and community partners to amplify our impact. This work inspires us because it is our goal to develop the next generation of innovative, ecologically literate community stewards and leaders in our region. And we know that it's many of your organizations and districts' goal too. So thank you for joining us today for this webinar and engaging in this important work to move environmental literacy forward in California. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. Okay, so I want to start off kind of by saying that this webinar series was intended to bring attention to this document that you see in front of you, a call to action for education leaders. And this document was developed to help all stakeholders make sure that there is a connection to the work that's already going on in California with LCAPs, MTSS, differentiated assistance, and make those connections to environmental literacy. So please share this document with those in your organization that play a role in these educational structures of our system. And let's begin today with the current context of environmental literacy instruction. So a blueprint for environmental literacy was developed in 2015 by the Environmental Literacy Task Force. And they defined environmental literacy as an environmentally literate person has the capacity to act individually and with others to support ecologically sound, economically prosperous, and equitable communities for present and future generations. Through lived experiences and education programs that include classroom-based lessons, experiential education, and outdoor learning, students will become environmentally literate, developing the knowledge, skills, and understanding of the environmental principles to analyze environmental issues and make informed decisions. But also stated in the executive summary of this document is this passage. Unfortunately, K-12 students in California do not currently have consistent access to adequately funded, high-quality learning experiences in and out of the classroom that build environmental literacy. While some students regularly participate in systematic, ongoing environmental literacy experiences, many more receive only a limited introduction to environmental content, and some have no access at all. And we know that California is the most biodiverse state in the United States and one of the most biodiverse regions of the world. California is a biodiversity hotspot because of its unique geography, climate, geological history, and size. And our biodiversity is under threat. Additionally, California faces many local and statewide environmental challenges, from wildfires to poor air quality, to tidal flooding issues, to drought and severe heat. And some of these issues are related to climate change, and others are more localized, but we have a responsibility to educate our students and our communities about these issues. We know that these environmental challenges disproportionately affect communities of color. We also find that some of these communities are also the same communities where students receive less access to science instruction and environmental education opportunities. And often environmental education is taught via science instruction. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected science instruction across the country. West Ed, this year, in their webinar, Science Learning During COVID-19 and Beyond, collected survey data from teachers in the spring of 2020 to find out how COVID-19 is affecting the teaching and learning of science. The vast majority of teachers feel students are learning much less through distance learning, and there is much less student engagement in science classes. The red and orange bars in this graphic represent a deficit from regular classroom instruction as compared to distance learning instruction. And that's why it's critical that we continue to keep teaching science during this time. Here is a resource from West Ed that addresses successful strategies to adapt K-12 science experiences for distance learning. Furthermore, in a 2020 report by Lawrence Hall of Science, A Field at Risk, the Impact of COVID-19 on Environmental and Outdoor Education, Science Education, these providers were surveyed nationally and reported that many of these organizations will be forced to close due to revenue loss related to COVID-19, and that an estimated 11 million students will be missing environmental education opportunities if their doors remain closed through December 31st of this year. So I know that's a lot of doom and gloom, but fortunately we know that environmental education can reinvigorate learning. The call to action document makes connections between LCAP priority of student engagement and citing research to support this. So yes, there's been a reduction in instruction and engagement due to COVID, and we face environmental injustice within our system. But what are the opportunities, the environmental education opportunities that we can incorporate to begin to address these challenges? And I just want to have us go into a breakout and shine some light on the great work that's going on out there in our state and highlight some of those ways that these challenges have been overcome. So let's take a 5-minute breakout and quickly introduce yourself and share a little bit about how we're still moving forward. Facilities are starting to close down a little bit out there throughout the country. And so how can we still promote environmental literacy in our practice?
I'm still really happy with our school district that decided to have all of their 5th grade get nature journaling kits, and they do weekly nature journaling in their neighborhood, which I think is such a fun way. They've been sharing on Flipgrid in their classrooms, and it's such a fun way to see what students notice and wonder about in their own neighborhoods when it's related to the outdoors.
That's great. And Amy, to answer your question, I know one thing Dean and his crew have been doing is still running some virtual camps, which he's probably talked to you about, but I think there's a campfire session I'm going to jump on part of tonight at 7. So I think some of those pieces are still really valuable.
I can also share that we have, our outdoor education is Walden West. So a lot of the naturalists from there have created social media. They've done TikToks and Instagram posts. And like you said, the campfire, they're trying to do weekly sing-alongs. And so they've definitely adjusted to the virtual piece very well. And by the way, Troy, someone put the acronyms in the chat. So you're good.
It took me a while to get all those typed.
That's why we made acronyms.
So I believe it's about time for me to bring people back. Should I?
Yeah, now's a good time.
But Thomas, you were going to share something real quick too?
Oh, I was just going to say that the California Geographic Alliance, we don't usually work directly with students. We do teacher professional learning, but with that not happening in the fall for California Biodiversity Day, I tried to get some students involved in citizen science and get them out making biodiversity observations, either like in their immediate home area or somewhere that they could access close to home. And that worked out fairly well with very short run up. So I'm gonna repeat that again.
Great. We just got to think different, right? That's the key, is keep moving forward and just try to figure out a new way to do it.
Well, in my opinion, I see a disadvantage to being inside the classroom as a momentary advantage for some things that I think would have been great to be happening all along, which is students out in their environment a little more, practicing observation skills, learning about culture and nature and things in the place where, from the place where they live. So it's an opportunity as well as a challenge.
I called us back, Dean.
Yes, yeah. Didn't I?
Yeah, I see the numbers going on. See you all coming back. All right. Well, as our last couple people are getting back in, we hope that you had a good, quick discussion about some solutions and some successes that have been having in your area. Please go ahead and mute yourself on your way back in. That would be super appreciated. So we wanted to start diving a little bit into thinking about how environmental literacy connects to the disciplines that you teach. Take a moment and look at this quote from Learning in Places. We want to recognize the fact that integrating environmental literacy into instruction allows our students to see themselves in the curriculum. They may not see themselves in the pages of the textbooks that we give them, but by using their real life experiences, by building on their own understandings, we can allow our students to take actions on environmental issues that are in their own communities and really start to see the relevance in the work that they're doing and bring their own cultures and their own spaces to the learning. Environmental literacy should be thought of as a lens and as a tool to help make our content standards more relevant for students in our classroom. If we think about water as an example, in the next generation science standards, the water cycle is part of our 6th grade disciplinary core ideas. We could teach the water cycle in a traditional manner. We could memorize the steps of a diagram. We could talk about evaporation and precipitation. But when we use the lens of environmental literacy, our students can think about human impacts related to water. They can consider what happens to groundwater. They consider runoff. They can then think about that in relationship to their own communities. And then you can build instruction for your students around how they can take positive impacts related to the water issues in your neighborhoods and in your schools. One way that we see environmental literacy as a tool is in our new State Seal of Civic Engagement. This is a program that was adopted by the State Board of Education, and it provides an opportunity for our teachers to allow students to engage civically. We see this as an opportunity to leverage civic engagement to enhance environmental literacy with students. Think about what a great way that you can integrate science, history, social science, even art, by looking at civic engagement and having our students work through earning that seal. The California Green Ribbon Schools Award is another way that we engage our schools and our students in environmental literacy. The 3 pillars allow our students to think about the school grounds, the human impacts of what's happening on their campuses, the health of the students and staff, and the connections to instruction related to their environment. The California Environmental Principles and Concepts, or EPs and Cs, are not new to us here in California, but they are new to us thinking about them in all of our content areas. They're a through line that is woven into our content framework and curriculum materials adoption criteria. These are a great entry point for programs or classroom teachers to address in their instructions with natural connections across content areas. Our education code also identified environmental literacy topics that our students should engage in during their K-12 experience. Climate change and environmental justice have been added as topics that our students should have instruction on. These are topics that are relevant to California communities and students. Notice that these topics connect to California's biodiversity and to the environmental challenges and health risks that Dean shared with you earlier. Students deserve an opportunity to understand these issues and to consider how they can positively impact these issues in their own communities. The California frameworks have given us permission and support to use environmental literacy as a lens with our students. Through his work with 10 Strands, Dr. Gerald Lieberman worked with each framework committee to identify content connections to environmental literacy. We're going to look at a few highlights that are here. So this is our science framework. We've called out some specific vignettes for you so that you could go on in there through the links and see exactly what this looks like. 7th grade, students might look at different numbers of organisms and the types of organisms that live in different locations in their schoolyards. On 8th grade, students might focus in on solar energy and think about how much energy their school rooftop provides. And in high school, students might think about synthetic fertilizers and how that relates to global hunger. In history social science, some specific ideas that are called out are how California has changed when we think of its agriculture and its economy. In 6th grade, about how the environment has influenced migrations of early humans and how humans adapted to those changes. That's something that is still really informative and needed right now as our climate continues to change for students. And in 11th grade, students might think about the prosperity of the 1920s and how that was related to the regional environments where people lived. Our health framework, which is relatively new, has some amazing connections when we think about healthy food, where we get food, how our food is available to us, and how we make choices about food. Thinking about what we have in our community, our air in our community, the water in our community, our access in our community to a variety of healthy places and places that we can get outdoors. Even in the arts, we see a lot of really clear connections. So we might have students go outside, look around in their urban environment and think about the shapes that they see there. We have seen a lot of this with animals, but you could even see it with things like your stop signs and your yield signs in your environment. And how does that relate to what animals or plants students might see? Students might look at music and think about it in relationship to the seasons. And students even get to the place where they're looking at civics, investigating local causes of water pollution, and creating media campaigns to promote solutions to improve public health. As the math framework is currently being worked on, we're starting to see some connections to environmental literacy there. So this is really something that's across all of our content areas.
Thanks, Crystal. You know, we've seen connections of environmental literacy in our frameworks and appendices from formal education, but let's also remember that the informal side of environmental literacy brings many unique assets and opportunities to environmental literacy education. Webinar 4 focused on the importance of environmental education community-based partners in this effort. They provide students with a local connection to environmental challenges and provide a variety of resources and programs to supplement formal education. When formal and informal providers combine their efforts, curriculum, local environmental emphasis, and relevance improve for the overall student experience. Okay, so when thinking about environmental literacy, it's important to first acknowledge that through the California Instructional Materials Adoption for science, 29 K-8 instructional programs were adopted by our State Board of Education with specific criteria requiring the inclusion of California's EP&Cs. In addition to those curricular resources, I would like to share some excellent environmental education resources with you today. This is not by any means an exhaustive list of resources, but more so a trusted resource list that may help to integrate environmental literacy into your educational practice. And for ease of this, we've created a Padlet and put each one of these resources on that Padlet for you, and that's posted in chat. So I'll start with EEI. The California Education and the Environment Initiative, known as EEI, is a model curriculum developed over a decade ago to provide resources for California's K-12 teachers to address California's environmental principles and concepts in their instruction. It uses the environment as a context to help students learn about history, social science, and science through an environmental lens. Since this curriculum was developed before Common Core State Standards and the Next Generation Science Standards, it can now be used as a supplemental curriculum, as the lessons may no longer be aligned to grade level content in our currently adopted standards and may not follow the shifts in pedagogical approaches that are seen in our most current frameworks. Teachers may access all of the EEI curriculum online for free. Another resource I would like to share is the Environmental Literacy Compendium. And found in the front matter of this compendium is this powerful quote. The environment is a central character in the story of human history. From the river systems that fostered the first human civilizations to the current challenge of addressing and combating climate change, the story of humanity is inextricably intertwined with the natural systems that have influenced our development and whose health and viability are impacted by their relationships with us. So in this spirit, the EL Compendium seeks to connect history, social science content and its topics with opportunities for environmental literacy in a very teacher-friendly way. Next slide, thank you. So in this compendium, what you'll find is selected sections from the history social science framework on the left, right? Particularly suited to the integration of EP&Cs. And then on the right, identified suggestions for instructional strategies and integration. And so the instructional suggestions are not fully developed lesson plans, but they are meant to provide teachers with a foundation on which to build lessons. Okay. Additionally, below each one of those instructional suggestions, the corresponding environmental principles and concepts have been identified, and when appropriate, connections to NGSS performance expectations are made, as you can see here. And then finally, to make it easy on all of us, right, they've included the EEI units and lessons as well that connect to that content area. And this powerful tool can be used to help integrate California's EP&Cs into history, social science, and science instruction when appropriate. Okay, I want to share with you another really powerful tool. And so in January 2017, the Office of Environmental Health, Hazard, and Assessment on behalf of the Cal EPA released version 3.0 of the California Communities Environmental Health Screening Tool, or CalEnviroScreen. And CalEnviroScreen identifies California communities by census tract that are disproportionately burdened by and vulnerable to multiple sources of pollution. So I'll just quickly point out on the slide, you can kind of see that red area, and that's the Central Valley where I live and work. And this map shows aggregate results of high levels of pollution as compared to other parts of California. And this data motivates me to educate and inform the communities that I serve about their disproportionate exposure and the related health effects that we experience. Now on the website from the Padlet, and if you were to go to the CalEnviroScreen site, you'll see that green and red map that you just saw, but underneath that is this kind of obscure link, but it's really important. It says combined map. And when you click on that combined map, you end up getting to drill down into disaggregated data on specific types of pollution, like ozone and particulate and drinking water and pesticide exposure. And what's really fascinating is if you click on the tab population characteristics, you also get to see how those same communities are facing other types of health related effects like asthma, like cardiovascular disease, and also compare against demographic categories like education level and housing burden even. So it's this great tool for inquiry to allow communities and students to think about environmental justice and whether or not, you know, how are my communities affected by exposure to pollution, and what are our health related effects, and just start doing some inquiry to kind of consider, you know, the landscape of what we face environmentally and with our health. Okay, another resource that I wanted to share with you today is the California Coastal Commission has several resources related to the coastal ecosystem, and they've recently developed lesson plans specifically addressing environmental justice. And so I would recommend that you check those out. And another great resource is the CLEAN Network. I first learned about this at the climate summit that CASE put on a few years ago. And the CLEAN Network is a community of over 630 members committed to improving climate and energy literacy locally, regionally, nationally, and globally to enable responsible decisions and actions. And what's great about this resource is each and every one of these, and there's hundreds of these resources in this CLEAN Network, have been vetted by scientists or education specialists, or I should say, or both really. So these are just wonderful resources that you can trust to bring into the classroom. Next slide, please. And there's specific kind of categories for the resources. You know, there's hundreds of them related to teaching of climate change, teaching of energy. Many of the resources have been translated into Spanish, and they have guidance for elementary teaching about climate and energy, as well as resources for culturally relevant climate teaching. And last thing I'll say here about the CLEAN Network is you can also filter these resources by resource type, by regional focus, by the dimensions of NGSS, DCI, cross-cutting concept, and science and engineering practices, and also by grade level. So you can really find exactly what you're looking for. Okay, and now I want to talk a little bit about the CASE, which is California Association for Science Educators, formerly known as CSTA, right? So in partnership with 10 Strands, they put on 2 climate summits in the last few years. And through that work, they created vetted lesson sequences that help teach about climate change. And one thing that makes these lesson sequences so special is that CASE took the time to partner classroom teachers with practicing climate change scientists to help develop accurate and meaningful lessons. And that these lessons have that inquiry focus found in NGSS. And some of these lesson sequences have even been modified for distance learning. So that's fantastic. And next slide. They're putting on some webinars to showcase these virtual lesson sequences that have been shifted for distance learning. And so we're going to provide the registration link in chat in case you're interested in attending that webinar. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Crystal.
So we also have our California Environmental Phenomena resources. These were developed as collaborations between teachers and scientists, similar to the work that CASE did with their climate change. The resources include supports for teachers which have an identified California local phenomenon, a driving question that's described that matches that connects to grade level standards for NGSS. And then it has a complete ideal student explanation so that as a teacher, you understand exactly what the science is behind the phenomena and what you should be hearing from your students at their grade level related to that phenomena. The resources either include 1 or 2 anchoring activities that the scientists and educators develop together, or a full series of lesson plans similar to what you see in the Case Climate series. Because these resources are focused on California, they include culturally relevant phenomena for our students. They include observations students might make in their neighborhood. They move across multiple regions. We look at things like air pollution in the Central Valley, and some of the phenomena are shown both all across the grade levels at an elementary, middle, and high school level, so that you can see how that phenomena might develop for students understanding across their work. We would be remiss if we didn't share with you the BEETLES project from the Lawrence Hall of Science. This is one of our well-renowned projects when it comes to environmental education. It is geared toward outdoor educators, so sometimes our classroom educators don't know about it, but their activities can be used in any classroom. They can be used to help you get your kids outside in your schoolyard, in your neighborhood, or during a full field experience. The goal of the BEETLES activities is to inspire students' wonder and curiosity about their natural world, and to support their skills of building explanations from evidence that we use both in science and in history, social science, and in ELA. The I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of activity is something that may be familiar to all of you. I've seen it applied not just in outdoor learning, but in science, history, art, and even math classes recently. So we have thrown a ton of resources at you. And then on top of that, you got a whole abundance more of them in the chat as we were going through. So we want to give you a chance to sort of work through those and talk them out. We have a couple questions here for when we send you to breakouts. You might think about what are some successful strategies that you've been using to engage in environmental literacy? What opportunities related to the resources that have been shared by us or by those that are coming up in the chat? And think about how your community partners might help you connect with this work. So we're going to ask you to go back into breakout rooms and spend about 10 minutes talking to the people that are there. Introduce yourselves again if they're new, and share what you're doing, what's working, what sort of inspiration's coming up for you with all of these new resources. Welcome back. We're just waiting for the last few rooms to close all the way. Everyone to be sucked through the void. Might be my favorite thing in the world about Zoom.
Is there a doctoral program in SFU for environmental studies?
There are faculty, actually some fairly, I don't know if well-published means it's, there are some really cool people involved in doing environmental literacy work at SFU. They've started a number of initiatives. Sean Blenkinsop, they began a school district partnership with Maple Ridge School. They began an outdoor education school that was completely based in place. So they have a yurt that kind of follows them around through the community for the entire year. And that's now kind of K to 7. We have nature education schools in my home district, Sunshine Coast, that are called the NEST program. They've published an overview of environmental literacy in Canada, and they've used the, they've conceptualized it not just as getting out of the school, but they've also looked at things like, what does climate change advocacy work look like? So if a student is going to be motivated to take action on climate change, that's another category, as it were, of environmental literacy. So they've broken it down to 8 subsets under that umbrella. So it really opens it up for some deep thinking around what does this mean and what could it mean in schools. So
that sounds lovely.
Yeah.
So that's ads. You can tell we had a fruitful conversation in our breakout space, and I'm hoping the rest of you did also. We really want you to consider as you're coming back what you might commit to as your next step as you're integrating environmental literacy into your curriculum and instruction. This might be supporting teachers to identify local phenomena. It might be developing a problem-based learning unit for your students to engage in. It might be as simple as using a lens of an environmental literacy topic when you bring up the next subject or next chapter that you're doing with your students. So we'd like for you to think for a moment and then share in the chat, what's that next step that you're going to commit to in terms of integrating environmental literacy into your curriculum and instruction? And we're hoping that by seeing each other's chats, you'll be able to keep that commitment for yourself, but also serve as some inspiration for the rest of us around you. So go ahead and drop that right into the chat. I'm seeing some great responses. This is really exciting. And I definitely think those of you that are looking at finding those community partners or thinking about what your phenomena or who your champions are in your district is a great first step. So as you're thinking about those steps and committing to them, you might be thinking, gosh, I'm not quite sure how to do that. And we realized that as part of the call to action document, step number 3 was really ensuring that your teachers get to engage in professional learning so that your students can be taught the environmental principles and concepts K through 12 and in different content areas. That professional learning might be involved with reaching out to a community partner who can help you with that work, reaching out to those of us here at Cali and seeing what we'll be offering in 2021, or to the environmental literacy or science or history, social science or health or art coordinators at your county office of education and asking them to help support you with that integration. We're reminding you that this is the 5th of 5 webinars that we were doing related to our call to action document. If you missed the first 4 and you want access to them, we do have the webinars recorded and they're available on the Cali website. This one will also be there and it will be sent out to you after this. Here's our website in case you need it. And you'll notice that when you're there, you could also sign up for the newsletter so you can keep up to date on what's going on and what's happening in the state of California related to environmental literacy. Really important, we would love to get your feedback as we're wrapping up this series of webinars. We want help and support thinking about what else you need and what you want in 2021 from us in relationship to your journey on environmental literacy. So please take that, it's being put in the chat. And again, we'll say thank you to all of our call to action contributors and to all of you. So I did see a hand raised, but the name of it disappeared. So you'll have to call yourself out, unmute yourself and call yourself out. Those of you who want to stick around and ask some questions, please feel free to do so. And those of you who need to journey on with the rest of your afternoon, we thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Crystal. I was the one who raised my hand, I think, unless someone else.
Charlie.
I'm wondering, as a community-based partner, I missed the 4th webinar, and I'm wondering if there is a list of community-based partners and their locations that teachers can find, so teachers can find us. That was my goal for moving forward.
That's a huge question. I think that's something we've been working on a long time. Our creek.org website, which is a statewide website, has the beginning of that done by region. Some of our regions and counties have a lot more comprehensive lists, so it does depend on where you're located. And maybe if you let us know what region or what county you're in, we can help you get connected with the people, your list keeper, if there is one in your space.
Charlie, what county are you in?
We work in the 9 counties of the Bay Area. So okay. I'm part of the CBELP network at San Mateo, but I would like to connect with other county offices and get on those lists.
Yeah. Charlie, do you know Andra from San Mateo County Office of Ed?
I do.
So that's your best connection point.
Okay, great. I'll connect with them again and yeah. Thank you all for your help. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I think Andra's on this webinar actually, but.
I'm getting a request for the previous screen.
There you go. Charlie, I'll drop Andra's email into the chat for you, okay?
Thank you, Karen.
Is this the last one, or are you guys planning to have some more?
We are hoping to do more based on what needs come out of the surveys. So please make sure you all let us know what you need, and then that's what we'll get the ball rolling on in 2021.